Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of August 1st. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission for up to 2 minutes on any item that's not on our agenda today. Anyone? Seeing no one, I will close public comment and go to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting as dated July 18th, 2012. Okay, under discussion, I would like to table item 7 so that staff can review those motions a little bit more carefully and make sure that everything that we have said there is accurate. Any additions, corrections, or changes to the minutes?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Drury.
Page 6, under the motion, 33 East Cannon Perdido. I recall in my comments that I was fairly vehement in opposing any changes, and I don't see that reflected in the minutes. Maybe I was braver in retrospect than I was at the meeting, but I recall being...
So would that mean that you would not support the motion?
Well, I would not. I can change that when they come back, but I just think in my somehow my comments concerning the non-necessary, the irrelevant. Yes, me too. The irrelevance of the steps and therefore the railing and any plantings. I don't know how it would be put if it's even necessary.
Well, it would probably be best if you didn't support the motion.
Can I do that? Can I do that?
You can't actually.
No, I can't do that. So I'll just. I'll just wait.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
As long as you're suggesting that the item be tabled, I would like to ask staff to check and see if the word variance was mentioned when the heights was discussed.
So for item 7, will you check the tape carefully to?
I don't recall variance being mentioned.
I think we were talking about it.
Was mentioned, but not variance. It's on the straw vote. I know it's on the straw vote, but it was discussion. I know that. Well, I don't know when did the straw vote asked about? Well, check the tape. That's the simplest thing.
Correct. Do you understand, Ms. Feliciano? Okay. Anybody else?
On page 6, at the top of the page, it's actually motion for item 5. I think number 1 should be the rear. Just say the rear of the building. The rear elevation.
So that comment should read, the rear elevation as presented is acceptable. Got that, Ms. Feliciano? Okay.
So and the other question, you are tabling this for next time?
Correct, 2
Okay,
weeks.
got you.
Tabling item 7, 2 weeks. If anybody has any comments on it, though, now, that would be fine to bring those up, and staff can check.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
On that motion for item 7.
Uh-huh.
Would I be able to recall my vote on it, on the height variance? No?
We would
Probably
have
not.
to do a reconsideration, and it's too late for that. So, no, you cannot change your vote at this point.
Consideration could be made at the next meeting.
I believe reconsideration has to be made within 2 days?
No.
3 days?
72 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
While we're on number 7,
Yes, Commissioner Lavoie.
item 8.
Comment number 8.
Yeah,
Okay.
needs to be restudied.
Okay. Do you have anything specific on that?
No.
Okay.
That may have been what I said, but
Okay. So pay particular attention to comment number 8, Ms. Feliciano.
It has raised emotions.
All right, that's enough. Anyone else? None? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of the minutes as amended? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Commissioner Schallenberger abstains. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Ms. Gantz.
Yes, Mr. Chair, item A at 416 State Street was preliminary and final approval as submitted. Item B, 314 State Street was final approval as submitted. Item C, 800 Calle Puerto Vallarta was final approval as submitted. Item D, 7 West Victoria Street was preliminary design project design and final approval as submitted. And item E, 1900 La Swain was final approval as noted. Those were all reviewed by Commissioner Lavoie.
Mr. Lavoie, thank you for reviewing the consent calendar. Motion by Boucher, second by Winnick. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Suding steps down on item B, 314 State. Next is announcements. A request by applicants is for continuances. It looks like we have Ms. Baker. Ms.
Yep.
Why don't I do one and then you can come sit here? I just have a
Let's tackle
couple
first and
of
then-
items coming up in August for you. August 15th, we're going to have the intent to hold a hearing to designate both the Central Library and the Faulkner Gallery, as well as St. Anthony's Complex and Grounds. And on the 29th, that is the hearing date we're proposing for both designations with the commission, as well as we're going to have a presentation on the styles to be included in our historic guidelines.
Okay.
And that is
And who will be presenting the style?
that'll be Anthony Grubine. He's worked for over 2 years with Jake before me in developing these drawings and about 12 different styles.
Great.
Representing what would be in our proposed
If
historic districts.
we could get copies of what he's presenting beforehand, that might be very helpful.
We have those.
Okay. Ms. Gantz, any other announcements?
Yeah, just, as we all know, Commissioner Sharp's absent from today's meeting. And then item 2 on the agenda at 902 Chapala Street has been withdrawn by the owner. So I contacted the following applicants and let them know to come in a little bit sooner. And I believe Ms. Baker had some
Okay.
announcements.
Is the project withdrawn or just this?
Just the review after final.
Okay.
It was just a small review after final to add a couple hundred square
so
feet
it's
of
postponed or whatever.
floor area at the corner. If you'll recall, it was canted
Uh-huh.
a little bit, so she's changed her mind. She's not going to do that.
Okay. Ms. Baker, and then Mr. Schallenberger.
Good afternoon, Chair Suding and Historic Landmarks Commissioners. I just wanted to report on the historic resources element progress to you. The Planning Commission did review the document last week, and it was a 4-3 vote to forward it on to the City Council. They didn't have any specific comments to be addressed as part of the motion. However, there were a lot of individual comments, and staff has a plan to address those individual comments as part of the staff report. We're scheduled for council for October 2nd. And then also the HRE task force met last Friday to go over your comments from your hearing and went ahead and integrated Susan Chamberlain's comments, and our urban historian, Nicole Hernandez, has talked with her, and that's all set to go. In the meantime, I wanted to also mention that we have gotten correspondence from the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum, and we're expecting further comment regarding which people they would like notified in the case of sensitive archaeological areas, and then also just the wording of how we're supporting current and new potential interpretive centers for Native American cultural education items. So we were aware that they had some concern with this wording all along. We were expecting formal public comment earlier in the process, but at this point, I think it'll be fine. We're not expecting any problems with the slight tweaks to language that they are probably proposing for those items.
So this was done, their review was done more as a peer review rather than an applicant review?
Well, we did visit their advisory committee that they have of Native Americans that meet with them each month. And during the initial discussion, I think it was in May, they had mentioned these couple items were of concern, or at least the museum item. And so we had expected formal comment prior to your review and the Planning Commission review, but they want to go ahead and add a little bit more language changes. But it was my impression from the task force that minor changes would probably be okay, and that's what we're looking at is minor changes. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Baker. Mr. Schellenberger?
Real quick, Ms. Baker, can you give a sort of a feel for why the vote was so close at Planning Commission?
That's a good question. I was going to ask that too.
Okay.
Commissioner Rios?
Well, I'd like to say that Ms. Reese and Ms. Baker did an outstanding job of presenting the document to the Planning Commission. And Fermina Murray and myself were there and Joe Rashawn, and were there to represent. And I think there was confusion around the word buffer. And this was something that had been approved previously in the general plan, but there were members that were unable to accept that now. And that was of a concern. There was also concern that historic preservation might somehow stop affordable housing or high-density housing from being built in the area. And one member was concerned that it would prevent the city from evolving. It was late in the day, and a lot of the comments were difficult to actually point as to what the problem was. And both Betty and Heather stood up and answered the questions, and sometimes the questions kept being repeated. So I think staff did a superb job, and they were applauded at the Next Land Elements meeting. I would urge all of you to recognize that this element is very important to the city of Santa Barbara. It isn't just keeping our city unique, it's a major economic item in this city. It attracts tourists, and that is a lot of money to this city. So I would ask that you keep October 2nd on your calendar to come and speak for this document, because there were charges made that had no foundation concerning the writing of this document or the intent of this document. And it's very important to the city. But Heather and Betty did an outstanding job.
Okay. Commissioner Schellenberger, anything else?
Very helpful.
Anything else?
Just back to the consent calendar, I need to abstain from ratifying item B. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any announcements?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jury?
Yes, I'd just like to say that anybody wishing to see the southerly elevation of the Arlington, this is the time to do it. Because there's nothing in the way but a green fence. And if you want to see that whole elevation, you have however much time is left before they begin to build, and not very long, but it's
It's
pretty
funny.
glorious all by itself, standing up there.
It is funny that you mentioned that, because this morning I was going through that parking lot and I glanced over there and I was like, that's an interesting view.
Yeah, there we go. The public should take advantage of that. Take
Yeah.
some pictures, too.
Yeah.
Never
It's the
been
last
seen.
time you'll see it for probably another 50 years.
Yes.
Or more.
Or more.
Okay, then subcommittee reports. Anybody have any subcommittee reports they'd like to bring up? None? Okay, then we'll move on to our first item. We're right on time, and item number 1 is the average unit size density, otherwise known as the AUD incentive program.
Can't find it.
The purpose is to discuss with this commission the key components related to the implementation of the AUD incentive program, including average unit size ranges, flexibility and development standards, and review process for AUD projects. Looks like we have Ms. Unzueta and Mr. Ledbetter.
Thank you, Chair and members of the HLC. I thought I'd just make a few remarks to set this project in context before I turn it over to Ms. Insueta to give you the presentation. I think as most of you will recall that the average unit density size program was adopted as part of the general plan last December, and they specified the basic components of what constituted this plan, and it was a delicate balance between protecting historic resources and trying to promote affordable housing and smaller units, smaller buildings in the downtown. And there was a fair amount of negotiation that went along with that in terms of identifying those areas that should have a lower densities, as well as the issue of the buffers, as one of your commissioners has already pointed out, that this was something that was established and adopted as part of the general plan. So what we have today and what you're seeing here is really we're working now on implementing this program, and this is bringing it through as an ordinance, and we're working on the mechanics of it, of actually how that will put these components into place. And what we're here for today, and we were at the Planning Commission last week, and I can summarize some of their discussion last week, but what we're here for today is to get your comments on the design issues, particularly as they relate to historic elements, historic resources, excuse me. And last week at the Planning Commission, they looked at the overall program and of course the mechanics of how average unit sizes will work in terms of densities and whatnot was part of the discussion, but mainly what they focused on was the employer housing, and it's a component. Ms. Insueta will explain where that kind of falls out in the overall program. But their main concern was about the affordability and whether inclusionary should formally be included or not as part of this program, and there was a lot of discussion about that. Other than that, they were comfortable with all the unit sizes and the development standards as proposed, and so that was really, it was preliminary comments as we are today. That's what we got from the Planning Commission last week. So we're here today to simply get some preliminary comments, your initial reactions to these development standards as they're being proposed, and we'll do the same thing with the ABR next week, and then we'll go back to the Planning Commission once we worked with the city attorney and we basically have a draft of the ordinance, and then on to the ordinance committee of the council and the council for final adoption. So that kind of gives you a picture, sort of sets it in context of where this is coming from, where we are in the process, and then what we're looking for from you today in terms of just real preliminary comments. So I'll turn that over now to Ms. Insueta.
Ms. Insueta?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission. As Mr. Ledbetter indicated, we're here to present the average unit size density incentive program to your commission, and also to receive feedback with respect to the key components that make up the program. The implementation of this program is directed by the general plan, and it is intended to replace the variable density incentive program that we currently have in the zoning ordinance, to encourage smaller unit sizes and buildings, protect historic resources, locate housing near commercial uses with access to transit and easy walking and biking, and also to produce long-term priority housing. In December of 2011, the council adopted the general plan update, and as part of that approval, they did direct certain aspects of the AUD program. With respect to densities, they directed, or they did approve, the 15 to 27 dwelling units per acre in the medium-high areas. For the high-density areas, 28 to 36 dwelling units per acre, and then there's a priority housing overlay that can be applied to the high-density areas and also the CM zone, and that would allow 49 to 63 dwelling units per acre. They also were supportive of a one space per unit minimum parking standard with no guest parking for projects that develop under this program. The locations would be most multifamily zones and commercial zones that allow residential use. The duration of the program will be a trial of 8 years or 250 units, whichever occurs sooner. The 250 units would be units that actually develop in the high-density areas. This is a map of the medium high-density areas where the 15 to 27 dwelling unit per acres would be allowed, so you can get a feel for where those areas are. Oh, I don't have the map. The medium, all these areas would allow this, but there's commercial, there's also multifamily, the R3, R4, and the commercial areas, some commercial areas. And also, this is the CM zone.
Okay.
Here is your high-density area. Of course, the more urban area, the downtown and the multifamily, and then the Milpas area here, the Milpas corridor, as well as the La Cumbre Plaza Five Points area. Oh. Now, this is just combining those two density areas.
I'm sorry, Ms. Unzueta, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Can you go back 2 slides, I think?
Oops. I think I can.
Okay. That area there is, I'm pretty sure this is State Street here, right?
Right.
Okay. What is this corridor and what is that corridor?
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
In other words, what street is that and what street is that? I can't read the map at this scale, or the scale that was provided to us in our. Pardon? Okay. And then,
Yeah, that might be Sola, but I will check.
because I mean that definitely crosses EPV.
We should have
Ms. Arias?
we should have an overlay map of the EPD to place on this to know exactly where we're at.
That would be very helpful.
Sola is what that is.
Sola, okay. Okay. Continue, Ms. Unzueta. Sorry to throw you.
No, I can't read that as well. So.
The Brinkerhoff, that whole neighborhood is high density, right?
Oh,
That
go
area
back.
there.
The
Yeah.
tan area would be Brinkerhoff, right? Somewhere in there. Yeah, sort of the bottom.
Lower down. Almost all the way at the bottom.
Down there.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. That's Carrillo there. Yeah, got it. Okay. Yes, correct.
The overlay, as I indicated earlier, the overlay, priority housing overlay would be applied to the high-density area and also the CM zone in this area. And that is the density tier that would allow the 49 to 63 dwelling units per acre.
Can I ask a question, please? Could you describe priority housing?
I am going to do that
Okay,
as part of this
thank you.
presentation. And then, of course, this makes up the entire map with both your medium, high, the high, and the overlay, which is the cross-hatched. So today, the components that we'd like to discuss with your commission are the average unit size ranges, the priority housing, flexible development standards, the review process that we anticipate as part of this project or program, and also compatibility findings. So with respect to the average unit size ranges for the medium-high density, we are proposing that they range from 1,450 to 805 square feet, and that would, depend on the density. So the 15 dwelling units per acre up here in your range, that corresponds to this number, and then the 805 would be the 27 dwelling units per acre. And I'm going to show you a table in a little bit that kind of has them all included. With respect to the high density, the range there would be 1,245 square feet for the 28 dwelling units per acre, and then the 970 square feet corresponds to the 36 dwelling units per acre. And then the the priority housing overlay, 49 dwelling units per acre would equate to the 970 square feet, and that's an average square unit size. And then 811 corresponds to the 63 dwelling units per acre.
Is there another factor? Because I'm seeing 805 to 27 and 811 to 63.
Do you have your microphone?
This isn't, I think this was just a discussion item.
Well, it's being broadcast, and City TV needs to pick it up.
But is there another factor? It doesn't look like it's a pure ratio.
No, well,
811 is too close to 805, where 27 isn't very close to 63 now.
correct. And we used FARs to determine the numbers. And so we understand that some of them are kind of a little bit maybe overlap and are close together. But I guess the primary premise here is that the greater the density, the smaller the unit size. And this is hard to see, but here you go. Here's the medium-high density. Here's where you start at the 15 dwelling units per acre, 27, and these are the corresponding average unit sizes. And here it is. So the medium-high density uses an FAR of 0.50 or 50, and then the density for the high areas, it uses a 0.80, and then the priority housing is graduated. I'm sorry, floor area ratio.
Floor?
Area ratio.
So it's 0.8.
With respect to priority housing, the preliminary parameters for this type of housing that we would be allowed under the priority housing overlay and the higher densities would be that the rental, well, the three types, the rental, the employer-sponsored housing, and the limited equity cooperatives. Rental, we would anticipate that those projects would be entirely rental, so they'd be 100% rental units, and they would remain rental in perpetuity. With respect to the employer-sponsored housing, again, those units would be 100% employee housing and remain such for the life of the project. And also, those particular projects would be subject to affordability requirements. And the limited equity cooperatives are designed primarily for moderate, or we don't anticipate that we would have any affordability controls for those.
Can I ask another question? Yes. What is an affordability requirement?
Well,
It's too complex.
it is somewhat complex. We would like those units to have some affordability. Obviously, we're trying to promote this type of housing for the workforce. And so we would want them to remain long-term affordable. So we'd
And
have
it's
some...
Generally related to income and percentage of income.
A question.
Yes, Commissioner Rios?
I've always been told there is no such thing as perpetuity.
Well, perhaps the term
Indefinitely?
should be...
And the city attorney has said, when I served on the planning commission, that you cannot guarantee or you cannot require something to be done in perpetuity, forever. It doesn't exist legally. You cannot do that. Pardon?
Okay.
Well, this would be a definition that we would research with,
Yeah,
with the city attorney.
vet the
He
definition
would
with the
be
city attorney.
providing the language for that.
Great. Okay, continue.
The employer-sponsored housing program, staff envisions that program to have the following objectives, as I indicated a little bit ago, that to provide workforce housing, also to maintain these units in long-term affordability, and also that there be flexibility to be able to attract employers to this program.
Commissioner Murray, question?
Yeah, where do the employer-sponsored housing fall within the densities?
The priority
high-
housing
yeah.
overlay, the higher density.
The higher density,
Yes.
okay.
I have a question.
Commissioner Lavoie?
What happens when the business goes under? So you build workforce housing as part of your business. You're out of business in 3 years. You get to sell that housing at market rate?
Chair, Commissioner Lavoie.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yeah, again, that's part of the details that haven't been completely worked out. There are several different approaches you can take on this. One of the approaches, for example, is that the housing is built by the employers or a consortium of employers, and Ms. Winsetta will get to that in a moment. And then they establish this below market price, and then that price is allowed to only increase, say, 2.3% per year. And so if at that point, and they would have to sell the housing to either a city employee or a South Coast employee. So if that employer that actually funded that or partially funded through the consortium went out of business, they would still, the requirements would still, run with the land, and they would only be allowed to have X amount of appreciation per year, and it would have to be sold to an employee. So those specifics would all be part of the development agreement, and that would be what we see as, in combination with a covenant, to be the main tool that would be used to ensure that kind of affordability. That was a lot of the comments that we got from the Planning Commission last week were a resistance to including the inclusionary program per se. They want to see some of these affordability measures, but perhaps not 15%, but negotiating terms such as those on a case-by-case basis.
So there will be mechanisms in place to keep it affordable.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue, Ms. Unzweta.
So Mr. Ledbetter basically went through the program parameters, so I'm not going to go through that, and I appreciate that. Development standards. There are several development standards that the program would propose to allow reductions to in order to achieve the objectives of the AED program, and specifically the priority housing. The City Council has already directed the minimum one space per unit and the no gas space, but other reduction or flexibility in parking standards could be that one space per 500 square feet of commercial parking be allowed for mixed-use projects. That already is allowed in the Central Business District, but this would apply for other mixed-use projects that aren't in that district.
I have a quick question. The space per unit, why is that not space per square foot?
Because it's residential unit.
I know, but residential units are allowed to be over 800 square feet. Ostensibly, if it's 1,200, 1,500 square feet, you're going to have more occupants, hence more cars.
Right. This is just for the commercial portion in a mixed-use project. The one space per 500 square feet.
No,
of
one
commercial.
space per unit, no guest parking. Minimum one space per unit.
Oh, that
no
one.
Why is that not per square foot or per bedroom? Then why is it per unit and not per square foot?
That is the direction that we got from the City Council, that they wanted a minimum.
Okay.
So that
You understand, though, the concern that if a unit is a large unit, and they only have to have one space, they may have 2 cars for that unit.
Correct, right.
Okay, but more people could be living in them.
Okay, can I answer that just?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair? Right now, the zoning typically for residential units in the city proper is 2 parking spaces per unit.
Right.
So you could have a 2,000, 2,500 square foot unit of residence if that was on.
Okay, so it's the same as what is standard now.
This is less. This is
No, I know. Okay, but it's tied to the same.
But it's
Okay,
applying it
okay.
in the same way. So
Doesn't
they're
make sense
reducing
to me,
from 2
but
to 1.
yeah, okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
the experience has shown over the years that the city cannot control how many people are in a unit. They lost the lawsuit on the Riviera. They cannot control where people go to work. They cannot make you take the bus. And they cannot tell you that you cannot have 5 cars, 1 car, or 10 cars. So I am concerned that this does not strike a balance that's realistic. And it's a comment I'm going to make. The overflow onto the commercial area of the city and the scarcity of parking can affect the businesses in the downtown area in a negative manner, and that concerns me.
Thank you, Commissioner Rios. Commissioner Schallenberger.
Zone of benefits trump this. In other words, one of these is in 100% zone of benefit. You still are allowed that zone of benefit for parking. I'm not going to have one.
I believe so, but those would be details that we would work out as we go through.
You could step up to the chair. Continue, Mr. Rios, or Ms. Anzueta, please.
Other reductions and flexibility in parking standards would include allowing tandem parking or car stacked devices, and those are policies or implementation actions that we currently have in the housing element that we would like to see that. This is to help with the the promotion of additional housing.
Okay. Did you have a question, Commissioner Murray?
No.
Okay.
Pardon me?
Commissioner Boucher?
Car stacking devices, I assume that's not on the street, would that?
No. They're
That'd be
called
in the
lifts,
parking
also
garages.
in the
Yeah.
parking garages.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
To maximize the size. With respect to variable setbacks, the proposal is to apply a 5-foot frontage variable setback in the C2 and CM zone, excluding State Street between Montecito and Sola Streets. Currently, there are no setbacks for commercial or mixed use in those those zones. So this reduction, not reduction, but this setback would allow for landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and openness along the frontage of buildings.
Can I ask a question? Why would it exclude State Street between Montecito and Sola and just not Cabrillo Boulevard and Sola? So what's happening between Cabrillo Boulevard and Montecito?
We took this direction from some of the discussion that happened during the alternative building height
right.
amendment process, and that was what the
corridor was.
The corridor was, or the
Interesting.
So that can change.
Yeah.
This is just a proposal at this point.
Commissioner Winnick?
So it says apply a 5-foot frontal variable setback. So I want to know what the variable setback part of that is. Does it go from 1 foot to 5 foot?
It could vary as long as you have an average of 5 feet.
Okay, so you could be 0, but then you'd be 10 somewhere
Right,
else.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, Member Winnick, Commissioner Winnick, to help create some of those public-private gathering spaces, that kind of thing.
With respect to open space, the proposal is to eliminate the 10% open space requirement for the Method A below on the slide, and also and to allow flexibility in the location of the 15% of net lot area that is required under Method B. So as you can see, the private outdoor living space Method A currently requires that projects provide private outdoor living space for each unit, a 10% open space area on grade, and also a common open area of minimum dimensions of 15 by 15 feet. It says inches there, but it should be feet. Yeah, sorry about that. And so the proposal there is to eliminate the 10% open space, and part of that reason is that these standards are really meant for the multifamily residential zones. So the the 100% residential projects. Currently, all commercial projects don't have to provide any open space. So this is just for the mixed-use project that would be developing under this program, and it would allow that 10%. Actually, no, it would be for all mixed-use projects, and staff is recommending that particular requirement be eliminated.
One of the problems of that I see is we have really less open space or space to plant larger material into Mother Earth or into the earth. It also reduces buffers between buildings. I would encourage staff to explore all the ramifications of eliminating that 10% required open space on grade. Granted, open space could be a balcony and not hit grade, but you don't get the opportunity to plant the same type of material in that
Thank you.
balcony.
I completely echo those statements. That was one of the big comments.
I think that would be a detrimental to the overall urban forest of Santa Barbara and the overall open feeling between buildings.
Can I clarify something?
Commissioner Winnick, yes.
Doesn't this apply to districts that already were just zoned commercial? Like this isn't applying to a district that's zoned residential, correct?
Correct. The residential districts would have to provide all three of those.
Right. So, so what I'm asking, the reason I'm asking this is, if one were developing a commercial development building and it wasn't mixed use, you wouldn't have any open space.
Right. Right.
So I think this is still implying something. I mean, I agree with you. I would like as much open space as possible. But I think even if the 10% were eliminated, what's being proposed here with a mixed-use development is still better than what we'd get if we just had a commercial development.
True, but if it's a mixed-use development and it doesn't have that 10% open space on grade, then we have nothing on grade. Commercial, it would be just like commercial.
Exactly. Which is not ideal, but okay. I get it.
Okay. Yeah, okay. He gets it. Okay.
Again,
get it.
Yes, Commissioner Arias?
with mixed use, you have to recognize there are going to be families with children. And what do? Tell the child, go play on State Street?
Well, go play on the balcony.
Fall off the balcony. So, I mean, you've got to, again, there has to be a balance of who is going to be in these units and how they're going to live. Yeah. And they may not be able to afford to move, yet may have several children. So there's a balance, and you have to look around to see where the city parks are and things like that. And where is the grocery store? If you want to, say that everybody's going to, I can't carry 50 pounds of groceries. And so you've got to think of what the quality of life is for these people who are going to live in these units.
Okay. Continue, Ms. Enzweta.
And the 15% of the net lot area, which is currently required to be provided on grade, the proposal or the recommendation is that it still be required, but it be allowed to be provided on upper floors if it can't be accommodated on grade. With respect to buildings over 55 feet,
Over 45.
Oh, 45 feet. I'm sorry. The proposal is to allow buildings over 45 feet, only those buildings that meet the following objectives, and that is that they be community benefit projects, affordable housing and some of the other special needs type of housing. that they also meet compatibility findings, which I'm going to go over with you in a little bit, and also that they be approved by a supermajority of the Planning Commission.
Supermajority, just refresh my memory, is everybody.
5.
Okay.
5 commissioners.
Okay.
There's 7.
Yeah.
So as these zoning amendments are going forward and being processed, an interim review process that would be established is that projects that meet the intent of this program could proceed with the use of zoning modifications to be able to, to be approved. And also another mechanism would be to have concept reviews by either the Planning Commission or the City Council on a case-by-case basis to provide early feedback with respect to the project and the zoning modifications that they may be requesting. And we feel that this would help to expedite the review process to have that early review and feedback. After the amendments are developed and approved, the ABR and HLC would still continue their current practice of reviewing projects, and all rental projects are come before you. But any project that would be proposed above the 45-foot height limit would go to the Planning Commission to make findings first, the findings that we spoke about. And then they would come back for final approval with your review board or body. Staff hearing officer, the same thing applies. They would have the same practice. These are the type of projects that the staff hearing officer would be looking at. And again, the Planning Commission would make findings for those projects that exceed the 45 feet. And so you can see what the Planning Commission is charged with. These are the compatibility findings that we are preliminarily proposing, that projects that exceed the 45 feet in height would need to meet neighborhood compatibility, and that would be being compatible with the surrounding properties and areas, and also that there be an appropriate size, bulk, and scale and height of the project. These are very similar. You're very familiar with them because they're pretty much modeled over after the findings that you make. The landmark and historic resources finding that a project be appropriately sensitive to adjacent historic resources, and the use of open space, and that would be that the project provide adequate common and private open space.
Mr. Lavoie.
Another question. Compatibility with neighboring properties. Where in this city would a 45-foot high building be compatible with the neighboring property, other than next to the
Courthouse.
It's true that some of the zones currently don't allow or have a building height limit of 30 feet, but there are zones that have the 45 feet, and then there's several commercial zones that allow 60 feet.
but allow and have as existing to be compatible with. There are none except for the Arlington Tower,
Okay.
Granada Tower. So there are.
Well, we just start building out from the Granada.
There will also be a finding with respect to the variable front setback, so we anticipate that projects, or we expect that projects would have appropriate front setbacks. And also, because we want to keep the units that are being constructed under this program, and specifically under the being priority housing, in long-term affordability. So the rentals would remain, and I use that word again, perpetuity, but we'll find the correct word for that. And also the same thing with the sponsored, the employer-sponsored housing.
Commissioner Murray, do you have a question? No? Okay. Continue.
And so for today, what staff would like from your commission is feedback regarding these components and the review process. Thank you.
Okay. we all had a lot of questions, and I'm sorry if we interrupted your stride. Why don't I just go down the line and ask if anybody has any more questions or specific comments they'd like to make or like to have like staff to investigate further. Commissioner Drury?
I don't yet.
No?
Some
Okay.
questions were answered.
Okay. Commissioner Boucher, any questions or comments?
I'm mulling it.
Okay. Commissioner Winnick?
No questions right now.
How about comments? We're going questions, comments. So.
Oh, we want to do both?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sensitive to the objective of this, what this is after, and I think it is great to promote sensitive development that's going to allow for employee housing in the city. So I like the idea of it. I don't have that many comments about it. I do understand, like, we had our little discourse just now about the open space, and I think that's probably the biggest issue that I see is how to balance open space requirements for people who are living in a particular location versus if it was just a commercial use. So I think getting that balance right would be good. Maybe there needs to be some percentage. Maybe it doesn't have to be 10, but maybe there still needs to be a percentage there. So I think that to me is the biggest issue. I'm fine with the reduced parking. I think that is something that is getting understood over time, that if you have one parking unit per dwelling, especially when there's small dwellings, that's reasonable. So that's pretty much what I have to offer. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Winnick. Commissioner Murray, questions and comments?
Yeah, I have a question on that. Back to that neighborhood compatibility. I guess I would like to know.
There.
Yeah, just neighborhood compatibility, compatible with neighboring properties. So that's kind of a very sort of arbitrary general sense, and because when you say neighborhood, I'm immediately thinking that each neighborhood has its own character. So to me, when you make compatibility, you're going to have to ask yourself, how is that structure, new structure, whatever it is going to fit with the character of the neighborhood. So I think somewhere along there, compatibility with neighborhood, not just properties, but the character of the neighborhood. I think that's really what happened with that
Chapala Street.
That house in West Mission, where they were building this, and we kept asking, how is this fitting into the character of the neighborhood? Something like that. Let's say an affordable housing is coming with very modern architecture, and you're trying to put it in, So anyway, I think a language, something to say about a neighborhood character, I think is important to add. The other thing I want to ask is just appropriately sensitive to adjacent historic resources. Is there a way to cite the, we are all assuming that historic resources element is going to pass, and maybe it should say somewhere that whatever you do should be consistent with that element, I think.
Yes, that's appropriate. That's appropriate to do.
And I think if you put it in this major language here, already you're giving the ordinance, a big strength in what it should be going to. The use of open space, I think, if you include, because we're not just talking about open space, we're also talking about trees and amenities like this, and maybe if you could include something about landscape, adequate common and private open space with landscape or something.
Substantial landscape.
Or something that defines that open space. And I think that will just be really helpful. So I'm just thinking of the developer come in immediately thinking of size, thinking of frontage, but he's also thinking, how am I going to create an open space with amenities of trees and all that kind of stuff?
And maybe just to look at it a different way, rather than a percentage of open space, say that it shall have 5 trees per unit or whatever. I know that's excessive, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Just to approach it from a different angle rather than just the 10%. Open space. Thank you, Commissioner Murray. Commissioner Lavoie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions, comments? I think the density you're proposing is incompatible with the Brinkerhoff neighborhood, period. I have serious concerns, as my question implied, about compatibility of a 45-foot residential building anywhere in this city until the first one gets built. And the other is a little bit more involved, and it goes back to when I was taught city planning in school. And he started with the beginning of city planning in the city of New York and why it evolved and why we have setbacks and open space requirements. And it started with sidewalk to alley tenement buildings housing the maximum number of people possible. And life conditions were miserable. And city planning started by making life better for those people by gradually very small steps. And what this seems to be doing is throwing out that entire history for the sake of housing. And what you're telling me is that low-cost people are not entitled to the same quality of life as everyone else. This is quality of life issues. Setbacks between buildings. I don't care where they are. They should be even greater in commercial areas, not less. Do you want to be living within 5 feet of a manufacturing building? No, you want greater setbacks. You want more open space because there is none in those districts. There are no parks. There are no public places for children to play, to go out and get a breath of fresh air, to live outdoors in the most benign of climates. I do not support your effort.
Commissioner Rios.
You said it very well. I spent some time in the Bronx at Albert Einstein. First of all, I have a problem with, I know that Mrs. Murray and I were at the meeting when some of this was discussed in front of the Planning Commission. I took a poll beforehand, and most of the members of the commission did not either watch it on TV or were aware of this. You said you only watched the landmarks.
Okay,
but that's fine. Excuse me.
Continue, Commissioner.
This has been sort of dumped on us, bang, like this, and we need to have a map of the historic districts to overlay and where our structures of merit are and things like this. We need to know this information before we make these blanket comments that it's good to have no setbacks or 5-foot setbacks and things like that. I think its impact on the historic areas of the city of Santa Barbara is extremely significant and detrimental. And it's creating a situation where there's going to be a lot of conflict. One of the things I've always considered is that there should be a balance between density and livability. And in this case, it goes way overboard in the wrong direction. I've said before, you cannot control the number of people in a unit. You cannot control if they have 3 children, 4 children. You cannot control the number of cars they have. You drive in this area and you ask where are the grocery stores, the amenities that people need for just common life. They will need cars to go places. You have people who will rent out units to 4 or 5 students, each with a car driving out to the university. This parking enforcement of 1 space per unit I think is unrealistic, and no parking for visitors. And again, this spills over into our commercial areas, which we are dependent upon in the downtown area. I think it's not well thought out, and it has serious consequences for the future downtown of the city of Santa Barbara. We need to balance open space and give people opportunities. Opportunities for parks, for places to recreate, et cetera, like that. I think neighborhood compatibility is a very big problem, and it needs to be clearly spelled out. And then the bottom line is all these conditions that are the enforcement of them. How are you going to enforce it? And what happens if the company goes out of business? This was asked by Commissioner,
Boy.
no, it was asked by Stella at the Planning Commission meeting. And landscaping is very important. You don't want to live surrounded by cement and asphalt. So I think there's some serious considerations about quality of life and preservation of our historic downtown in this document. And I, for one, would like to have seen a staff report, the maps and information, instead of it just being dumped on us as an item on our agenda. We needed to do some homework on this and do some thinking.
Thank you, Commissioner Rios. Commissioner Schellenberger, anything to add?
Just that sort of one of the tough things to do in here for me anyway is to separate personal member of the public philosophy and ideology versus the role as a commissioner, and just to sort of think about how things like this affect historic resources. And something that jumps out in terms of maximizing density is you're essentially talking about maximizing adding more people. So I don't know that it would necessarily conflict in terms of the structure that's on a site. All of the design review guidelines would still apply to that structure and that site. I'm not hearing that this would trump any of that. So you get, I don't think it would necessarily have an effect in terms of the building and the landscaping and the site. You'd still have to meet our project compatibility analysis and all of the design guidelines. But I do get concerned about, we talk about historic setting and historic use of areas within the EPV and various landmarks and structures of merit throughout the city. So, and higher densities and higher populations don't seem compatible to historic uses and historic settings in certain, in those districts. So it does feel like there may be a conflict of interest here between historic setting, historic use, and added density.
I don't know that I want to get into my comments. I mean, anybody else have anything that Commissioner Jury?
There's something that seems to me it's somewhat being taken out of our hands if there's a priority found to generate something that's going to be over 45 feet. It doesn't seem like our guidelines would apply, just judging by the language. And it's not on the compatibility findings page. It was before that, where the city council would have some stake in it. And that raises a great number of questions, because the city council is politicized, unfortunately. And I wonder if we're not opening up, if that's a possibility, if we're not opening up some terrible can of worms. I don't know if I'm being alarmist, but it just seems to me that it's as part of the ongoing discussion as to what Santa Barbara is going to look like in 50 years. And I don't want it to be a museum, but I also don't want it to be become have this vertical urban core that has no air, no light, and no beauty. I guess that would be my comment.
Commissioner
Just
Boucher,
a question, isn't that already the case, though? I mean, those approvals, those levels of approvals is already what exists now. Is that, I mean, the average unit density wouldn't change that, right?
Let me respond to that, please, Chair. Yes, in fact, what the height limit now is in some of the districts, as Ms. Nsueta said, is 60 feet. And so what this ordinance will do will effectively, lower that height to 45 unless you make these specific findings and you have the supermajority. So, in terms of restraining taller buildings, I think that this ordinance will in fact have that effect. as opposed to, right now, it's pretty much carte blanche for 60 feet, with the understanding that you have to make it through the design review boards, and you have to make the compatibility findings with each of the respective boards. What this does is add another layer of insurance that buildings that are going to go over 45 feet, they also have to be identified as community benefit projects. The council has to identify them as such, and then they have to get a super majority of the planning commission. So these are added protections. I wouldn't say they were lesser protections.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Rios, quickly.
The planning,
Quickly, please.
I'm working on it. The
Okay.
Planning Commission asked that this matter be continued. And I would also ask that this matter be continued and that we have maps and things like that and the staff report and information in front of us so we can have some discussion with
I think
Just as a point of clarification, the Planning Commission did not ask that the item be continued. The item will come back to the Planning Commission for recommendation.
Okay. I don't think you have full support of this commission. I think the spirit of what is trying to be done is there, but we're not there yet with this commission. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely agree.
For everybody?
Yes.
I don't want to speak for anybody unless they are in agreement with that.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Jury?
I would
quickly.
echo and endorse Commissioner Urias's recommendations that we have just simply more information and more time, because this is really a critical
This is
discussion.
the whole
So,
future
and it's a
of our
discussion
city.
item, no action's going to be taken, but you've heard that you don't have support for this from this commission.
Thank you. Clearly, we understand that there are several members of the commission that don't support the program at all, and I don't think that's going to change,
No.
even with more discussion of the item.
No, I think in spirit, we support what's behind it. It's just not.
Well, I think a couple of them I hear don't even support the spirit.
That's a minority.
Yeah.
We have to get a
However,
consensus.
we would be happy to bring you more information as we develop it. That's not a problem at all. We appreciate your initial comments. That's really all that we were looking for. I think your comments about the open space, the parking, the landscaping, those are all very helpful, and we will incorporate those as we move forward with this. But we will be moving forward, and we'll be taking your comments into consideration, and we will notify you as each step progresses so that you have that ability to be part of the process.
Okay, and in what time frame would you be doing that?
Well, we'll be going
Coming back to us.
Well, I'm not sure that we're going to be coming back to you at this point. We'll be going to the ABR next, and then we'll be drafting the.
Okay. Well, if you do come back to us,
Drafting
staff, I request that we have at least an hour for the discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Feliciano, did you get that? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would make a formal motion that we request them to return to our commission to discuss further developments and to also supply us with a map, because otherwise it's going to get lost and we're not going to get anything back. So I'm going to make it a formal motion.
I will second the motion.
Ms. Gantz, can you help me out here? This is agendized as a discussion item. Can we take action? Okay. So motion fails. Sorry.
Okay.
We would strongly recommend that staff bring this back to the Historic Landmarks Commission. We would encourage it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I need a chemical break. That's all I could do. That's all I could do.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boucher.
I just want to make one comment that I personally know of a family who lives in Paseo Chapala, and they have 2 children, and their window looks out in a light well, and I don't feel that how people live has been taken into consideration in these large
Quality of
projects.
life.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Moving on to the next item. The next item is item number 3. Item number 2 is postponed. Withdrawn, excuse me. Item number 3 is 33 West Victoria Street. This is final approval of the following details: the wood fence at the northern property line, tree species, Quick Creek concrete planter detail, sidewalk layout near the diagonal curve, revised stair illumination, and building color selection. I could help you there, couldn't I?
I've been leaning in front of you for a while.
Really? It's good stretching.
I could use a pointer.
We have 2 pointers.
You have 2? Wow, an abundance.
Did you manage to pull these up from your computer?
I looked at them on the computer. I did not print them out.
I want to pass it down to anybody who wants to look at it. I printed it out.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation, please.
Jason Curry, project manager with PMSM Architects.
Welcome. And be sure to turn your microphones on. No, it wasn't. Okay.
Okay, I'm Steve Metch. I'm with the Ensemble Theater Company.
And Derek Weston on the board of Ensemble.
Welcome all.
Thank you.
Okay, the last time this was at HLC was on March 14th. Final approval continued indefinitely for colors and details with the following comments and conditions. The applicant's sensitivity to the historic resource is appreciated. The Commission directs staff to begin the process of designating the site as a city landmark. The extent and hard work of the applicant's drawings is appreciated. Resolve the neighbor interface with respect to proximity, access issues, and other concerns. Study using a larger tree than the Stenocarpus to replace the London plane trees. Provide a cut sheet for the Quick Creek planters. Reconfigure the layout of the sidewalk near the diagonal curve to widen the perceived distance between the 2 sidewalk edges. A mid-block crosswalk should be left out of the project as it may not be a wise idea at the proposed location. The step lights proposed in the risers are not acceptable. Reconsider a color more appropriate to the Gothic revival style. The proposed blue color needs more substantiation and research. It was suggested that the paneling above the the stage door be diagonal. Plan where the expansion screeds will be placed on a large expanse of plaster. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. So I'm just going to go down that same list and describe to you on the plans where we've addressed those comments. Comment 4 was resolved the neighbor interface. What the plans are showing, we go to sheet A0112.
Let's wait a few seconds for everybody to get there. Okay, go ahead.
The existing condition is a wood fence along the property line that has a hedge on it. We had originally proposed putting back something similar in kind. In meeting with the neighboring property owner, we discovered that the hedge was a maintenance problem. So instead we're proposing a wood fence and then bringing back in some landscaping by putting it in box planters up against the building. That'll keep it a little bit more clean, less maintenance. And the other issue was kind of clearance at the point at the end of our ramp where the fence is and the adjacent building. And what we've done is we've located the new wood wall entirely on the property of the theater and given 2 inches. So that's the east property line. The next item was studying a larger tree to replace the London plane trees. And I believe that our landscape architect worked that out in subcommittee with Chair Suding. But if we turn to the landscaping plan. Into sheet LP1. We've changed the species from Stenocarpus to Callistemon feminis. And our landscape architect also reviewed that selection with downtown parking because that is on their city property there, and they were acceptable with that change as well. The next was provide a cut sheet for the Quikrete planters, and those are the planters that I was just talking about along the east property lines. So if we turn the page over to LP-2, at the center bottom portion of the page here, there's the cut sheet. It's a very simple with a little molding at the top.
Not quite a cut sheet. That's more of a detail. What are the finishes, colors, and textures?
So it is going to be or what we're proposing is a standard gray concrete. The next item is reconfigure the layout of the sidewalk near the diagonal curb. And we can look at that area on sheet A0101. And I brought a little diagram to help visualize what the change was. So we're talking about the area right here. And previously, this little jog section was further to the east, so it was out here. And it was a concern of Public Works that we wanted to give as much room between the landing and that curb so that pedestrians could walk by.
So we could see the original one that you had proposed right there.
Correct.
And you're moving it west. Okay.
And Public Works is happy with that revision.
Great.
The next comment was the step lights. So we had proposed lighting these steps by putting a little light recessed under the riser at the front. And we've changed that. So now we're showing a similar fixture that's tucked into the side underneath the edge molding so that it's within the shadow line of the molding and it pretty much out of view because it's probably only 18 inches off the ground. We can look at a little...
on your sides instead of on the front. Okay.
It's on the sides instead of right on the step on the front. You can see a detail of that on A0121, detail 1.
And what's the finish of that face plate?
So it's like a flat black metal.
And what color are your railings again?
All of the railings are flat black.
Okay.
So the one area where I don't want to propose making that change is the steps where we don't really have a great location to recess that fixture into the side wall, that being the one that's at the south end of the building. And it's behind this screen wall, so the only view of the steps are as if you're exiting the basement. And it could get pretty dark down in here, so I think that right in the risers is a good location for there, as well as this stair, which faces the parking lot side. To put them into this face of the building, we don't have a nice little recessed edge detail to hide them under like we have at the front. So that, if we look at 9 on A0123,
Looking at it this way.
so I'm proposing to put them into the step in this location because putting them in the sidewalk here would make them more visible. I think they're going to be more discreet if we have them in the steps in this location.
Is there a gate here?
No.
That's the basement.
No.
So we've got two locations. It would be in the basement as well. That's the one that I looked at.
The first one you showed us, yeah.
And then this one is on the east
Yeah,
alleyway.
okay.
The next item is the exterior color. And if we turn to sheet G010. So I want to talk.
Hold on one second. Okay, continue, please.
So I'll describe the research that we did and then the proposals that we'd like to make. First, we were able to find the earliest photo that we were able to find that kind of gave a little bit of a hint of the colors was this photo here from the 80s. It's a black and white photo, so it's not a great help, but we can at least infer some color information from that photo that some of these, the wood trim was a darker color than it is right now. Then we were also able to do some paint scrapings, and that's what I've shown at the bottom of this study drawing. We found a number of different layers. There is a pinkish layer, there's a gray layer, and then a little bit more of a tan layer. And that's kind of on the brick and the stucco areas. And on the wood, we also found layers, but if we get back to the wood, and if you kind of look in between the grain, we think that it probably was a dark stain on the wood originally. The real indeterminate piece is whether or not the brick was originally painted. We can do as much scrape back as far as possible, but that wouldn't tell us if it was ever at one point not painted. So from the information that we could gather, I think we can't really determine what the original scheme was, particularly in the area of the brick. Another part of our research, we looked through the city records to see if we could find, evidence of the changes through. And the last one that we could find was in 2005, where it was in 2005 a pink color that was then changed to a white with gray trim color, which is the current color now. So what we would like to propose is, since it was only painted 7 or so years ago, and there's still a good lifespan of the paint, is to really only paint the areas of the theater portion of the building where we're going to be doing new construction, and to bring them up to match what's existing now. And then when the paint that's on there now gets to its lifespan, then look at paint for the entire building. Another reason for looking at it that way is Ensemble, who's doing the theater remodel, really doesn't have rights for painting the rest of the exterior of the building. This little drawing was a start to look at what this best guess at the revival scheme would look like, and then just kind of showing that it wouldn't really, we tested it out just to see. I don't really think that it goes well with mixing and matching the current scheme with what we think this revival scheme might be.
Can we see a picture of the building as exists
today?
Sure.
Ms. Gantz, do you have any photos?
Yeah, I can also share the color material boards. And there's one photo of the existing building.
I think Mr. Schomburg wants to see more. But,
There's existing, and then I want to see what's proposed. You wouldn't know that unless you went to the building. This presentation doesn't show that.
Were your photos in with your printed plans last time?
I didn't, in this updated set of plans, I didn't include.
But last time were the photos?
The last time it had them.
Okay, I'm going to grab that.
So we can look at the last set of plans had overall elevations and detailed shots of the existing scheme.
So continue with your presentation then, while we're waiting for Steph.
That Gothic arch window is a pretty good representation, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This board does have photos of the current scheme and the proposed matching it.
You got it.
That's these.
No, the proposal.
No, well,
That's your historic scheme.
I don't have chips for that scheme.
Okay.
no.
And they would, the proposal would be to paint the fly tower the same color that exists now. New construction would be painted the same scheme as what exists today.
Correct. That's what
that
that's what
represents.
those represent.
Okay, continue. It was suggested that the paneling above the stage door be diagonal.
So I took a look at that and sketched it a couple different ways. I would like to stay with what we had on the plans before, which is a vertical paneling. This is what is on the plans currently. It was before. And looked at either taking some diagonals or maybe even looking at the trace area that's on the existing tower, which is kind of where we're getting a lot of the elements for this new portion of the tower. And I think that the diagonals aren't really consistent with the other architectural detailing in the existing building. There aren't any diagonal decorative members. And I think that the vertical wood just kind of works well with the simplified version of this tower.
No.
So I'd like to...
Thank you.
Yep. And the final comment was plan expansion screeds. And we've taken a look at the area of plaster that we have in the tower, and since we have divided it up with, let's go to the elevation. Let's look at sheet. A1301.
A1301.
This is really the largest single area that we have, and even that area we think we can do without expansion screeds, so there aren't any expansion screeds planned in the building.
Okay. All right. I believe you're finished.
That concludes.
I mean, are you? You've gone down the list and you've answered all the questions. But if
Actually,
you
sorry,
had something else.
I do have one other thing. One item that wasn't brought up in any of the HLC hearings, but that was brought up by Public Works, is the material for the curb in the public improvements. So if we look at sheet A0101, we received a comment from Public Works when they were doing their plan check. They said we had proposed a concrete curb, and their comment was install a sandstone curb per HLC. And it hadn't actually come up in our hearings, so I wanted to clarify with the board that we could, in fact, use concrete instead of sandstone.
What's there now?
So what's there right now is sandstone that's been pretty heavily painted over and asphalted up. So I brought some photos of the existing.
Yes, Commissioner.
I think they have in Public Works somewhere a lot of the sandstone curbs.
They do have a stockpile.
Yes.
Okay, so the commission needs to give the applicant some direction on concrete curb versus sandstone curb.
And one other point, if I may, one of the reasons why we're proposing concrete is we have some tight radiuses to make the drop-off area work. And to do that in sandstone you're not going to end up with the typical aesthetic that you get out of sandstone. There's going to be more segments and probably a little bit more give in the mortar joints. As well, we have Parkway Planner for 90% of the extent of this curb, so for a large portion of it, it won't be visible from the sidewalk.
It's also going to be painted.
And it will be painted.
Painted red, I assume?
Yes.
Or white.
Well, the drop-off area would be painted for drop-off, but all of the other area, we've identified it as, the reason we put in the Parkway Planner is we don't want to have people stopping there and blocking the traffic, so those will be painted red.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Drury.
Boy, no questions.
Commissioner Boucher, questions?
I just have a question. It has to do with the curb across the street, which I believe is sandstone with metal, like staples, except they're like cast iron, and it's very beautiful. You couldn't do that, could you?
I'd have to go out and take a look at it. I'll take a look at it.
Commissioner Winnick, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Murray, any questions?
Could you explain again about the paint? I didn't quite get what you mean about being unable to paint the building.
Ensemble Theater Company has a long-term lease on the theater, but it has no ownership or control of any kind over the balance of the building. So the entire balance of the facade on Victoria and the entire Chapala facade and the entire back facade of the building belongs to somebody else. So if we were to change the color, the two halves of the building would not match.
How did that happen?
It all matches today, but if we were to change...
No. I mean, how did it happen that one building on one property got divided amongst two owners?
Actually, it's the reverse. It was two buildings on one property, always owned by one entity. It's never been a separate parcel.
And don't ask about the history of how it got to where it is now. It wasn't a clean history.
Well, I guess
Curious.
my question is, I'm wanting to understand, because when you were doing all this public, it seems like the public had given this theater a sort of approval to do all these public improvements, private improvements that will be shared by the public. And I don't know, I guess I was always assuming that it was for the whole property. And so the color and all that. In other words, it's kind of hard to take one building and split the painting.
So you're saying in particular because what they're proposing as improvements really sort of encompasses
the whole building.
But then when it comes time to paint or do improvements to this, we can't do that, encompass that.
We've got all these trees here, we've got all this, I guess.
Because this is all in the public right-of-way.
Right.
So this isn't theater property, and it's not the office building property. That's public. That's why this portion was all, partly joint presented from Public Works and ourselves.
Even the existing steps in the entry to the building are partially in the public right-of-way.
So have you approached the other owner as far as coming to some agreement in painting the whole building?
We have not asked. We know it would cost almost $100,000 to paint their half of the building, and there are 3 nonprofit organizations, but we haven't asked. We assume that in some 7 to 10 years, when both sides of the building will be repainted, that it's necessary for the owners to come back to HLC. That the scheme that is on there now is the one that was approved by HLC some 7 or so years ago. So when it's time to renew it, we think that would be a good time to look at the entire building.
Okay. Commissioner Murray, any other questions? No. Commissioner Lavoie, any questions? No questions. Commissioner Rios, Commissioner Schallenberger, any questions?
How extensive of a search did you do for color photographs of this building? And were any historians contacted and that type of thing, UCSB?
So we had Post Hazeltine as consulting historians putting together the historic report, and they didn't come across any color photos in their research. They were the ones who sent me that one black and white photo. And their historic report doesn't have any mention of colors originally.
And then is there a raised concrete planter, prefab planter made that's more compatible with this building architecture?
Or compatible with the guidelines?
Well, than the one that's proposed, I should say.
Mr. Cunningham? The pots appear on your plans.
Yes, we can investigate, see if we can come back to something that's more satisfactory.
You don't have a microphone, so.
Can I shout?
You want to sit here?
we can do some research and see if we can come up with something that's more satisfactory to the commission, if that's the
Your answer.
condition upon
okay.
approval.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, Commissioner Schomburg? Okay. Commissioner Jury?
I do have a question, and it involved Mr. Rowbottom. I know there was some concern on his part at that meeting, I think the last time you came, about that particular border. I think you share that common border. Did that get resolved to his satisfaction? He's not here.
He's not here today. We've had a number of meetings with him.
And I'm assuming he was noticed on this
So
item.
It's still hanging in the air as far as the fence hedge thing. But you're going to the hedge is common between the two, and you're going to put a fence that's all completed on your property line, is my understanding?
What's existing right there now is a hedge and a fence, and they wanted to eliminate the hedge, so we decided to do box planters against the building instead, and to just put in a solid fence, which was what they wanted.
Because there was some question of transient sleeping in there or access over a wall, I recall, during the discussion.
There is a shared trash enclosure
That's right.
at the south end of the property. And we're not proposing any changes to that. It's an open top now, and we're still proposing it just to be an open top.
Thank you.
We have tried to listen to the neighbors' concerns and accommodate them. I don't think we've done everything that they would have liked.
Okay, so we're going to go into comments, and obviously you can comment on anything you want, but I would like it if you would focus your comments on the step lights pertaining to this set of stairs, the color, the painting of the building, and the pots that are proposed in that alleyway, and as well the curb. So there's 4 things I'd like you to focus on. Of course, if you have other comments, feel free to make them. Commissioner Schallenberger.
Just before, about the step lights, are they louvered?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I didn't have any issue with the step lights, both the recess detail that you proposed or the step light, if they're louvered. They're so benign anyway that I have no issue with that. The east property line fence, no issue with that. It's fine as you propose. The planters, I think, need to be restudied. We already covered that. The exterior color, I think the most compelling argument there is the adjoining building. But I don't see how it wasn't exposed brick at one point. I mean, that's how it was done when these things were built. So, if you had your druthers, it'd be nice to see the exposed brick again at some point. But I think I could live with the argument, or I just don't know. I don't see the 7 years from now, the lifespan thing. That can't really be a condition of approval. It's not really enforceable. So I'm not really considering that. I just think you're right. It'll be a huge clash if there's 2 different paint schemes.
Do you mind if I point something out on that particular item? If the building were to come back in 5 to 10 or 10 to 7 years, whatever, 7 to 10 years, it wouldn't necessarily have to get HLC review if they were painting it the same color. So that's
My misunderstanding.
that's the sticking point we have. Yeah, this is like okay, sorry, Commissioner Schallenberger, continue.
My misunderstanding.
Okay, so it's a bit of a quandary. As far as the sandstone curbs, I could support the concrete. The idea of sandstone is you see the stone. When it's painted and or obscured, it doesn't matter. So it's more durable than concrete anyway, and I can support that approach.
Commissioner Rios.
Well, I think the lights are fine. I like the fact that they're not in the side of the building. I think if you were carrying heavy stuff up and down, the potential for them to be smashed is higher than if they're in the steps, frankly. So I think that's good. The paint is the thing, the color is the thing I'm mostly concerned about. I have no problems with the curb. I have no, the pots can be worked out. That's not a big deal. It's the paint that I'm concerned about. and I think you've done a good job of answering a lot of our concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Rios. Commissioner Lavoie.
Starting with the curbs, this portion of Anapamu Street has sandstone. Victoria Street has sandstone curbs on it. I think you should have sandstone curbs to match, even though they're going to be painted. I understand that Public Works has used a cast sandstone in other locations that was successful, particularly when they're painted, at least in matching the texture, and at a lot less price. The paint color is my major thing, and I sort of think it was unfortunate that how many years ago they allowed this building to be painted white and baby blue. And I think it ought to be painted appropriate colors for the Gothic revival. If only part of the building gets painted, well, only part of the building gets painted, and they'll realize how ugly their building looks and come up with the money. Or when they do come back for a repaint, hopefully someone will be smart enough to catch it and say, no, paint it that color to match. I agree with the pots need to be more appropriate to the Gothic revival. Stair steps, fine.
The step lights, you mean?
Step lights, fine.
In that one location.
Yeah.
Commissioner Murray, anything to add or change or differing?
I agree with all the comments. I too support the paint, and the paint is the biggest problem. My biggest problem is this building, when it was studied, it was elevated to be a city landmark. It went from I think that was the recommendation. It is a landmark, huh? It's a structure of merit, but it was elevated in the study to be to qualify as a landmark.
Yeah, it's on my list of things to change the status of.
To be a landmark. Yeah, and that elevation requires you to be consistent with the color, the appropriate color for it. So I too support what Mr. Lavoie said. That if it be that you are doing this work on your side, do it correctly to the historical integrity.
Okay, Commissioner Winnick, anything differing or add?
I'll comment because I've heard two different things about the curbs. So on the curbs, I'm in favor of sandstone because texture matters to me. Even if it's painted, at least it'll be consistent with the rest of the street. The lighting is all fine. In terms of building color, Commissioner Schallenberg's comment actually intrigued me. My guess is that this building would have been brick originally too and wasn't painted. So what about that idea? I mean, if in fact it's going to be different than, because I'm hearing the drift of where this commission seems to be going, that perhaps this half of the building is going to look different than the rest of it. What if in fact it were to be not painted?
Just an add to that, the
Sure.
REI building just did that recently, pretty successfully.
Remove the paint on the brick. Yeah.
So anyway, I would actually support that being studied. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher, anything?
I don't have anything further.
Microphone.
I think the idea of looking into seeing if it was originally brick probably was, not in my memory, but which goes back pretty far. But I have nothing beyond that.
Commissioner Drury, anything to add or elaborate? You got a list there.
Well,
Glad
I
to
think
see it.
I think that the idea of making it is although it's part of the same edifice, it's a different building. I mean, it's made differently, and I would support in general terms bringing it into what Commissioner Lavoie was suggesting, but I would not support it as a vote. I would not put that burden on you. I think painting it the color that as it exists in that whole facade, I would support that instead. Down the line, I think it would be well worth pursuing to bring it up, especially if it's going to be a landmark standard. And I think the curve I can support just plain concrete, but I would hope that if that came to pass, that the sandstone would be saved. I'm assuming, is that?
It's a requirement
It's a
of a public
requirement.
works
Good.
permit.
That absolutely needs to be done. And I do appreciate the layout of the sidewalk and the diagonal curve. That's a nice space there. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Schallenberger first, and then Commissioner Boucher.
Just to sort of stay on track of the presentation and what's being proposed versus, I mean, I made the comment about the exposed brick because it was in the study. You had mentioned it in your study. You said there's no way to determine if it ever was, which is true. But I think as far as the presentation, I think what we want to ask ourselves is the question, is this proposed rendering acceptable? Because I think that's what the applicant is proposing as option B, option A being leave it as is. So I'm just trying to be clear of what is being proposed here.
So this is really only at the level of a sketch, because we wanted to propose keeping the colors as they currently exist. If it was the board's decision that we can't do it that way, this would need more study to form it.
Okay, thanks.
Well, and I think that our last comment was reconsider a color more appropriate to the Gothic Revival style. The proposed blue color needs more substantiation and research. You've done the substantiation and research. We haven't seen a full proposal for the Gothic Revival style. This is not considered a full proposal because you're not calling out the colors as needed. Commissioner Boucher was next. Commissioner Boucher?
Oh, I'm back on the sandstone curve.
Is your microphone on?
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Awesome.
Mr. Winnick's comment was good, to have the sandstone there for the texture.
Okay, Commissioner Lavoie.
The color scheme as colored on the drawing in front of you, I think is acceptable. The Oxford brown was commonly used. I would recommend that the white and the tan be flipped, so that the tan's on the bottom and the white's on the stucco elements, and that the pink be taken out of that tan. So it's not a mauve, but a tan.
I didn't follow the last part of that, so I'm hoping staff did.
The darker tan, both the lighter and darker tan colors have a pink cast to them.
These colors here.
No, to your right, middle?
These.
Yeah.
This one and this one.
That pink needs to be taken out
Okay,
of those
yes.
and grayed.
Okay, gotcha. So, I mean,
Don't go yellow.
the problem is that we don't have color names on here or color identifiers. They're also not real color chips.
So you're at the mercy of the print.
Yeah, so it's hard to make a comment like that. I appreciate the comment, but we actually need to see the real color chips. That's why I said that this wasn't really a proposal, because it's not the way a color proposal is. I have to get Commissioner Murray.
Yeah, I just want the applicant to really work with the historian to come up with the appropriate colors for this kind of architecture, and at least bring that to us so we can see. I understand what Commissioner Lavoie is saying, but it's actually really hard to really see those things just by looking at that like that, because it's the architecture is. It's got a lot going on, so you really have to see those colors, take them out to the sun, check them out, but they need to be absolutely appropriate as you are treating a city landmark.
You have 30 seconds.
Well, in defense of Jason, that drawing was just to study whether the building would look mismatched if it had colors. It wasn't a proposal. I want to say that for my own purposes, if there is a way of conditioning us or accepting a commitment from us to look at this question when the building really does need to be repainted, that would be great. I personally am troubled by having them look differently. I'm not nuts about the light gray color myself, but I would love to address that both for financial reasons and getting along with the co-owners all at once so we can deal with the entire building.
Unfortunately, we can't place conditions on a project more than what the permit.
And is it correct? Another thought is, I think that it's not a historic landmark today. It's proposed, but in 7 years, it probably will be. Would that
Okay.
change? Would
I'm
that
gonna
change that
summarize-
requirement?
You've had more than 30 seconds. I'm going to summarize the comments and look for a motion. Sandstone curb shall be provided on the Victoria Street curb. Restudy the planters to be more appropriate to the architecture and to the district, the raised planters, I should say. Reconsider a color more appropriate to the Gothic Revival style. Did I get everything? Those are the three basic comments. The step lights were okay on, so. Okay. The step lights on the southeast corner of the building. Okay. Step lights as proposed are approved. That doesn't make any sense. I mean.
So moved?
Okay.
Question.
What do you want, 2 week or indefinite?
Could I ask for a clarification on the sandstone? Somebody mentioned a possibility of doing a cast sandstone. Is that, does that motion also include investigating that?
In light of the curve, that might
Yeah.
help.
No, I'm going to try and rephrase that. A genuine sandstone or a simulated sandstone curb shall be proposed for the curb along Victoria.
Thank you.
Okay. No, we had. How long do you want? 2 weeks is indefinite.
I think we can shoot for 2 weeks.
Okay. So it's a 2-week continuance made by Lavoie, seconded by Drury.
I did not.
Okay. All right. Seconded by Boucher.
I'm sorry.
Under discussion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Question.
I just want to hear what was the setup on the thing again? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Reconsider a color more appropriate to the Gothic Revival style. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
I assume your statement, the raised planters, are refer to the pots?
Correct.
Thank you.
Further question?
Commissioner Drury.
We really can't vote on color today because we have no color chips. We have no,
Right.
so that's off the table?
No, it's reconsider it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Provide color chips.
That was my
Okay.
question.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to direct the applicant, on his final approval submittal checklist, it says C for paint, color, trim, et cetera. It says C color/material presentation boards. So, Jason, they do need to be actual paint chips on a, you can bring it in like this, but then we need the actual paint chips on a little
So
board
our
separate to that.
presentation that had paint chips are on those two boards. That's what we wanted to propose today.
I'm sorry?
They did that.
Yeah, they did that. So they did. What they proposed today was not. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I thought because somebody made a comment on the
Okay,
in
so
front of you. Thank you.
everybody comfortable with the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Suiting? Abstain? Motion carries. So one opposition, the rest are in favor.
And the
Do
reason
you
for the
understand the motion? Suiting. Public improvement or private improvements in the public right of way. Or
Yep.
improvements benefiting the private.
Thank you all.
Thanks. I respectfully ask for a 5-minute break.
We have broken
We have
ground
one more.
already, and it will be
Yeah.
finished in
12:20
time for
tomorrow.
the opening.
for alterations to City Parking Lot 5, including the following: convert the current entry on West Victoria Street to an exit, install an 80-square-foot pre-manufactured kiosk, associated parking equipment, and electric service, realign the exit driveway, and new landscaping and frontage improvements from the access drive to the eastern property line of the adjacent parcel Victoria Hall Theater, including a sidewalk extension and 370-square-foot parkway planter. A total of 600 square feet of surface will be repaved.
Oh, the pretty one first. I'm gonna see the fields.
Okay, introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation, please.
Jason Curry, Project Manager with PMSM Architects.
Victor Garza, Downtown Parking Superintendent.
Bob Cunningham, Landscape Architect. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to apologize for my impertinent and indecorous response to your initial question during the last item.
No worries.
Grovel some more.
Mr. Curry.
Right. Let's turn to the architectural site plan to get an overview of this project. Look at sheet A3101. So the scope of work of this project is a portion of the sidewalk extension and Victoria Street improvements that we were previously looking at with the Victoria Hall remodel project, starting at the east property line of the theater building to the running to the what's currently the entrance access to city parking lot number 5. This proposal is to change the entrance of the lot into an exit, put in a new kiosk to support that exit, and some public improvements that are related to changing this into an exit. We got to this sort of scheme, first of all, by looking at doing a temporary construction yard for the construction of the hall. And that led us to thinking about using this as a temporary exit. And at that point, Parking Division thought that if we were going to do that as a temporary exit, that this would actually really improve the function of the lot to turn that permanently into an exit. And improve the function of the lot so much that where we were showing 2 additional parking streets in the street before, that it would really be a balanced improvement if we were to remove those street parking and turn this into an exit. What we have to do at the Victoria Street to make this an exit is to put in a parkway planter or a no parking area so that someone turning out can see traffic coming this way. If there were cars parked there, then that would be blocking the view. And transportation didn't like that idea. So this is continuing the sidewalk extension and the parkway planter that we set up in front of the theater. And then the existing curb ramp lines up with the existing side of the street over here. The existing drive comes somewhat like this now. So we're adding a little bit more planter area, and then we're also, we can get into the landscape plans, but considering replanting this whole side. For the kiosk itself, we looked at the last project that passed through Historic Landmarks, and that was the kiosk that was at lot number 4. Thanks, Victor. And maybe I'll just flip back to this first page that had site photos, and we can just take a little bit of a look.
Excuse me?
This is the one behind the CVS and 1129 State Street.
Yeah, it's the next one down, Chapala. So this is a photo of that one, that booth. This is right on Chapala Street, and it's got a masonry base metal window frame, and then a standing seam copper roof with some copper gutter and downspout. So that's the newest one that's been put in parking lots around town. The existing kiosk at Lot 5 at the Chapala Street is a slump block masonry with a clay tile roof. To get us familiar with the site, the rest of the photos on this, this is a photo from the parking lot looking north, looking down the Isa Drive. And on either side of this, we're looking at the wide planter area on either side. These two are kind of side views, looking along where the exit drive is. And then underneath that, views of the that access from across the street from the north side of Victoria Street, and then finally a full kind of panorama outside of Victoria Street. So as far as the booth, we'd like to propose something similar to, is at Lot 4. If we turn to sheet A3201. So very similar, except I'm thinking of one different type of masonry at the base. This is showing a slump block masonry as opposed to the sandstone. I think that in this area is a little bit more kind of rustic than the Lot 4 because it's in the middle of the planter area. I think this might fit in a little bit better. I think the scale works a little bit better on such a small booth to the sandstone before it ended up being fairly large blocks. So the building is pretty simple. There's a floor plan and a roof plan. It's got kind of angled sides on the approach on either side. Next sheet over A301 gives the elevation on the opposite side and the two ends. So that's the basic idea of the booth and the overall
Landscape.
scope. If you want to look at landscape.
Sure. No, we haven't. Is that your question?
No.
Have we got questions? Yeah.
I'll wait.
Okay, landscape, please, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Parkway Strip planter is essentially the same as what you've already given preliminary approval on for the front of the Victoria Street Theater building. This planter is what we're concerned with now. This is the new kiosk location. We have 3 existing relatively healthy London plane trees, which we intend to preserve and protect. The remainder of the landscaping consists of 3 different plants, a prostrate natal plum, which has thorns, which is desirable from the standpoint of preventing walking across the planter. 2 other plants, Aloe spinosissima, a kind of a small version of the tree aloe, and also bird of paradise. And SR. Yeah, I apologize for the lack of contrast. I was hoping that by coloring this, it would be a little easier to read. It's somewhat easier to read than black and white. But anyway, that's essentially it. We are converting this entire planter to a drip irrigation system and removing the massive xylosma hedge. This will ultimately result in operational savings for downtown parking because they'll reduce their green waste and man-hours of labor involved. That's the extent, that's the scope of the project at this point in time. The xylosma hedge will remain along the other side.
Okay.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to the presentation?
No, it seems like you covered it.
Great.
Okay. I have a sort of a general question for Mr. Garza, and I'm going ahead of everybody else so that you kind of know. What is the downtown parking's policy on side street entrances? Is there such a policy? It seems that, and let me rephrase that. Okay. It seems that almost every parking lot, Lot 10, Lot 2, those are the structures, they have entrances on the side streets.
Yes.
Entrances and exits. The one at Figueroa, the surface lot, that has a side entry. And I don't think that happened by accident. So there was some thought put behind those entry points. Do you have any light to shed on that?
All those decisions were made before my time. I can tell you right now that staff and I don't like those entrances that are sort of remote, where there is no kiosk next to it. A person comes in, there's a malfunction, there's nobody around to witness or for the person to contact. A lot of times people do what we call switch tickets when there's a remote entrance, like the one here at Lot 5. So we just, in general, don't like them. The reason we're supportive of making the temporary conversion to an exit into a permanent exit is that Lot 5 is one of our busiest lots. And if you've ever been in Lot 5 when it's been busy, you experience the gridlock there. And we feel that when Victoria Theater gets going, it's going to be even worse, especially when people are trying to leave after a show. So we feel with an additional exit, so we maintain the one on Chapala Street, we'd have the one on Victoria. We then have an easier way of flushing out the lot. Is the main reason why we're here with this idea. But getting back to your original question, the problem is not with entering the lot. The problem is with exiting it. And this was an opportunity for us to get rid of a remote entrance that we don't normally like because it's a maintenance problem, and then also to aid in the exiting that we experienced the gridlock and relieving that.
Being out of town, if somebody's out of town and they're not familiar with the our street system and the one-way issue, or not issues, the one-way streets that we have, it could be rather confusing for them to find. Well, this is a comment. Sorry, never mind. So, questions from the commission. Commissioner Drury, any questions?
Yes, I do. So you're proposing basically two exits and one entrance. Are the street parking spaces affected along Victoria? There's 15-minute parking in front of Bouchon, and will they be affected?
So on that side of the entrance on the east side, there's no change to the street frontage.
But what about the other side?
So on the other side,
that's you guys, kind of.
We had proposed at one point two parking spaces, but those don't work as far as having exit traffic.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. My feeling especially about this particular, it's an upper lot, and I think that my feeling is that the entrance on Victoria serves an entirely different traffic flow than the one on Chapala. The people coming downtown from uptown, from down De La Vina, down State Street, that's the entrance they would use. Otherwise, they have to go all the way around the block. And is that a comment? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Anyway, I think so that's good. Does it serve another part of the city?
Well, we did look at trying to fit 2 lanes in and to make it an entrance and an exit, and that didn't fit. So it's got to be one or the other. One other option that we looked at is making it a temporary entrance, particularly when there's a big rush hour coming in for theater traffic.
Now. You said a temporary entrance.
Yeah, so after we've converted it into an exit, keep the ability to use it as a temporary entrance for like a high volume of traffic coming in from the theater.
Okay.
So in which case it would be staffed, manned. As far as looking at it as an entrance from Upper State, I don't know if you can speak to that.
I have 2 more questions. Have you talked to the neighbors? The restaurant on the west side and Olio Limone, and have they indicated any feeling about having an exit?
We haven't any communication with them that I know of yet.
We have had some comments about not liking the queuing upon entering, and also the problem with folks coming in on Victoria and turning in and queuing on Victoria itself, and then also being in conflict with pedestrians that are walking on that south side of Victoria. So we think changing it to an exit will take care of those problems.
Queuing can happen on exit, correct?
But that happens inside the lot.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher, any questions? Commissioner Winnick? Okay. Commissioner Murray?
So let's say it's going to be an exit going to out on Victoria. Will that be a right-hand turn only? I mean, you're coming out and you're going right, or can you go both?
My understanding is that they can turn either way.
So it's like a two-lane exit, or
There'll be one lane,
One.
and you have two choices.
you have two choices, one going left or right. I got you.
Unlike the one at Ortega where you can only go
You can
right.
only go right.
Okay. Commissioner Lavoie, any questions?
No questions?
Commissioner Murray, yes. Commissioner Schallenberger? Just have one quick question. Why is the concrete pad here where the existing arm and electrical, why is that remaining?
We are relocating the equipment. There's no specific reason why the pad's remaining except just to reduce scope.
All right, and I forgot to open public comment, and so I'll do that now. We have one letter from Cars Are Basic. I believe everybody knows what Cars Are Basic are. After being advised of the following, we find that to be ill-advised and unnecessary expenses, disruption to the area that's converting the West Victoria to an exit. This item is similar to an idea of the proposed parking lot changes associated with the MTD bus station on Chapala and Figueroa. Cab pointed out that the traffic condition to State Street, which is narrowed to one lane each direction, would develop congestion on State. It appears that they are not in favor of converting this to a exit only. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment, bring back to the commission
Mr.
for
Chair?
comment. Yeah.
Just have one quick question before you go to comments.
Uh-huh.
Jason, when I was looking at the plans, I thought isn't there a kiosk going in that location?
Yes.
Okay, well, somebody asked a question about, what's that?
No.
The box?
There's a
Yeah,
concrete
somebody asked
pad.
a question about the concrete.
This is
Oh,
this is the old one.
Thank you.
Okay. Comments, Commissioner Schallenberger.
Yeah, on that note, so the drawings don't appear to be coordinated. The kiosk shape shown on the architectural sheets don't match the civil or the landscape. And then I was also looking on the demolition plan, where I don't see the removal of I think there's an existing arm there now, isn't there? I don't see that identified on the demolition plan. But more importantly, I mean, that's just an item you'll get into when you get into plan check. When you're presenting to Historic Landmarks Commission and you're talking about changing a potential or having an impact to an adjacent historic resource or changing a historical setting, what you need to show is existing and proposed in a really clear manner. So, like, on this, you could use the landscape plan, I guess, but the better one is the architectural, no, it would actually be the civil plan that shows.
Which, 5 of 6, or?
It's 3 of 6, is showing the new layout. You need to show the existing sort of dashed in, overlaid in this new, over the new, so we can see, and this came up on the Mason Street Bridge. That never was shown, and that is still, I think, an issue. So I can't really tell from this plan what the old looked like versus what the new is going to look like, and it's just a presentation. I mean, I can envision it, just like I can read one sheet to the next, but that overlay is huge in helping convey that information. The kiosk itself, the architecture, is generally acceptable. And once you get into these public improvements things, it seems like there's a lower standard. But I know, I had a question. Who is the owner of this? Is this a city's project? Okay. And then so I assume that there is support in terms of making it an exit only in this location instead of this has all been worked out, and that was part of the initial presentation. Just trying to make sure that there's no that these things have been fleshed out. But I don't really see it having a real impact on the resource. It's not. I don't know. What's there now isn't all that superior anyway, but I don't know that I can really comment on traffic flow in and out if that's not really a historic matter. But I just think I'd like to see it when it comes back just have a little bit better presentation in terms of existing and new, and then as far as the extent. The architectural site or the civil site plan and the landscape site plan don't go back as far as I think we do on the architectural site plan. So I'm not sure entirely in terms of scope. Yeah, this A3-101 takes it around and wraps around the back of the building, but the public improvement plans don't do that. They're cropped. It cuts off at the southerly portion. So that was sort of another matter of communicating the information as far as what is in the scope of work of the proposed project. I know I got off on sort of a technical matter here, but just based on previously approved kiosks, it would be difficult to deny the architecture itself. And then the parkway, it seems to be more than adequate landscaping. It seems to be a large landscaped area, which is always a bonus and a plus under our review. So I have generally neutral comments.
Doesn't sound neutral to me.
All that for neutral comments.
Well, it's just a tiny little kiosk. What am I going to say?
Commissioner Rios, any comments?
My own comment is that I think that the landscaping is a plus. And as long as we are assured by the traffic department that it will not create hazards by changing this exit, then I think it is a plus for the area and also for the theater area. However, I defer to you on reading the plans for their consistency and would hope that they would be consistent the next time around. Thank you.
Commissioner Lavoie?
I would agree with the consistency comment.
I think the kiosk base would be better done in brick, and that the adjacent buildings, both in Victoria Court and in the theater, are brick, as being more compatible with the neighborhood than slump block. The landscape plan is commendable, and the scheme itself seems to have some merit, so I would support it.
Commissioner Murray?
Yeah, I'm not going to that.
Okay.
I actually think the one-way exit is going to work. That parking lot is just ridiculous. When you try to get out, you are just sitting there forever. And you cannot go anywhere because people are entering from the Victoria, people are going out, and other people are coming in. It is.
I thought you said you didn't have anything to add.
No, I'm just really supporting
neutral comment.
That's going to come back in hot.
Feels like a Friday.
Commissioner Winnick.
Okay, so I'm starting with a question, even though it's comments.
Your microphone is on, right?
My microphone is on. So my question is on this side of the property, it's staying the existing planting, but I heard that, and I forgot your name, I'm sorry, sir.
Mr. Cunningham.
Mr. Cunningham. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. I heard that you weren't that in favor of that planting material when it was on this side as being removed. So my question is, why is it not being proposed to be removed there and replaced with compatible planting that's here?
Excuse me. I believe Mr. Garza will back me up on this. It's downtown parking's intention to ultimately change the other side. At the moment, there isn't a budget to cover that, but it is the ultimate plan.
Okay, good. That's what I'd like to hear. So now you know my comment is that I would like to see the landscaping be the same on both sides of the driveway, and I'm in favor of Commissioner Lavoie's assessment of the base on the kiosk. Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher?
I agree with those comments.
Commissioner Drury?
I support this project. I disagree quite vehemently with the ingress and egress. If you have one entrance instead of two, you'll have people turning the corner on Anapamu to get into that lot. It's already bad enough with the buses, and I'm there a lot, and I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. You're going to have trouble getting in or trouble getting out. But the idea of making it more difficult to get in is going to create gridlock on city streets as opposed to in the parking lot. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's going to cost money that the city should not spend, and I don't support this project in any way.
My comments are in alignment with Commissioner Drury's. I think it's very beneficial to have, and it's not a Historic Landmarks Commission purview, but I do think it's beneficial to have the entrance on a side street to our city parking lots, especially if people are on State Street and they want to try to get to a parking lot and they encounter one-way streets such as Chapala and Anacapa. So it is a benefit, I think, to the community and to visitors to have those side street entrances. So for that reason, and I won't be able to support it. So somebody want to make a motion?
Before the motion, I just wanted to say one thing.
You can go right ahead.
Okay.
I'm not going to stop you.
I wanted to find out who you were having review the plans over in transportation. Derek? Okay. And then the other thing was I wanted to let the commission know that there were going to be 4 conditions of approval regarding the sycamore tree, that it's about 6 or 7 feet from where the proposed kiosk will go. And I believe, did I copy you on that, Bob?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Okay.
I've spoken with Tim Downey, the city arborist, and he's comfortable with this. We will have conditions on the final drawings that state the excavation for the pad for the kiosk will be done under his supervision. It will only be done with manual tools. If he determines that the tree is in jeopardy, he will advocate removing it and will replace it further away from the kiosk.
Anything else?
If it's a remote chance that it will be jeopardized by this work,
right?
But the work will be supervised by the city arborist, and if he makes an executive decision that this is endangering the tree to the point of risking public safety, he'll order it to be removed, and it will be replaced. But
we've had
very
some
comfortable
problems
with this.
before with emergency removals and executive decisions. It would be what? Oh, it would be beneficial if that tree is in jeopardy, that Tim Downey check in with the chair of the commission.
I'll give him your number, Mr. Chair.
I just think that likelihood should be prevented completely. So I think it really should be restudied, the placement of the kiosk, to make sure that you're not impacting a tree. I mean, doesn't make sense. to say that we're going to do it, and if we do impact it, then we'll remove it. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to go along with that.
Well, they have some issues where there's an existing electrical transformer, and I'm assuming that's below grade.
It's a 9-inch excavation maximum, and it's doubtful that any roots over
That's
2
yeah,
inches would be disturbed.
That's, yeah. Commissioner Schallenberger.
And that brings up another point that I meant to mention in terms of the drawings. It's not located on the site. There are no dimensions as to where the kiosk lands.
I'll just put it over there.
In relation to the tree and/or distance down, face of curb, or it needs to be located on the site.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion? Commissioner Lavoie.
Acknowledging that this is a concept review, when the applicant returns, that he make a better effort at coordinating the drawings presented in a more final form, that the placement of the kiosk be reconsidered for the viability of the sycamore tree, that the scheme as presented is supportable, that the proposed kiosk is supportable, but that the base of the kiosk be in brick, unpainted brick.
With baby blue trim.
With baby blue trim, no. With no baby blue trim. And that the landscape plan is supportable.
Okay, and the motion, was that for 2 weeks or indefinite? 2 weeks or indefinite, Mr. Curry?
Let's shoot for 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2-week continuance, and a second by Boucher. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Aye. 2 oppositions, jury suiting, abstain. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Meeting adjourned.